Hello, thank you for taking a moment to watch this video. And on this particular training, we are going to continue working through our Zapier training. And more specifically, we're going to be continuing our all PhoneBurner calls webhook zap that we're creating here in Zapier. So if you watched the previous video, you now know how to create a webhook URL as your trigger action event in Zapier. And you know how to apply that URL to the dispositions in PhoneBurner. And so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to continue on to the next step, or the next phase within this step really, and we're going to test it. I wanted to make sure that you knew exactly how to test this, so that's why this is its own step here. So we're going to jump back over to PhoneBurner. The only way we can test this is through PhoneBurner because that's how we trigger it. Remember, this URL has been applied to the dispositions, and the only time something will be sent to Zapier is when a contact is called and dispositioned with one of the buttons that has that URL applied. Now in this particular case, we've applied that URL to all of the dispositions. So all we need to do is jump over to our contacts. We can use our sample contacts if we want for this. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of the sample contacts and begin a PhoneBurner dial session. All right, so now that we're calling a contact, remember every one of our dispositions has that URL assigned to it. So we can click on any one of these dispositions to send the contact and call details over to Zapier. So let's say we're calling Sam Sample and it goes to voicemail. So we click the voicemail button. Of course, that would move us on to the next call. But in this particular case, we only selected one record, so that ends our session. Now we can close that window, jump back over to our Zap in Zapier, click on the Test Trigger button here, and you can see that the call, the information from PhoneBurner, has now been sent to Zapier. We can see the details listed here. We had the status, left message, that's the button we clicked on, the duration of the call, start and end time, and a lot of other details in here. Call ID, dial session ID. I'm not going to go through every one of these individually for you, but just note it's all of the contact details plus all of the call details, including any custom contact information like custom fields, plus that lead ID. Remember when we were pushing data into PhoneBurner? We talked about the lead ID being able to send an outside or external ID into PhoneBurner so that that information can then be pulled out of PhoneBurner to update that record in some other system. Now in this particular case, I used a sample contact that doesn't have a lead ID. So if part of your testing will require you to have a lead ID, you're going to want to make sure that your test calls are to contacts that were pushed into PhoneBurner from your external system. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's go to contacts. Since the leads that I pushed into PhoneBurner were all sample contacts with not real phone numbers, I'm going to go ahead and update these contact phone numbers with phone numbers that are real, or at least sample contact phone numbers. So I'm just going to call Sally Sample here and begin the dial session. So here we are calling Sally Sample. We did voicemail last time. Let's say that this time Sally answers. We have a good conversation. We've got all of our custom field data. This is another reason why we probably want to test with contact data that's coming from our source. Let's go ahead and mark this one as live answer. End the call, and then let's click on one of these other disposition buttons. Let's say we set an appointment with Sally Sample. Click that button, and we're off to our next call. Now let's jump back over to our Zap. In this particular case, you'll see there isn't a test option like we had before. You'll see this menu right here. We're going to click Load More. When we do that, that's going to tell Zapier to look for any other recent records that have been sent over to our webhook URL. So that's request B that just came in. Let's go ahead and select that one. And you'll see status is set appointment, duration 23 seconds. This has now been updated with the new record, new call that just came through. So let's look here. It was connected. We should be able to find our lead ID. I must have passed it here. There it is, lead ID. So here we go. That is the specific ID. Once again, depending on what you're linking to, you may want to make sure that you're always pushing a specific ID, a record ID from the external system into PhoneBurner so that when PhoneBurner sends that information back out, you've got that information to link this record to the record in the other system. So anyway, that's how easy it is to test the webhook option in PhoneBurner. Just launch a dial session, call a contact, and click on the disposition that has the webhook applied to it. So that's it for this particular training. Thanks for taking a moment to watch this, and happy dialing.